Well, reading Just Kids, which is a love story, a memoir, and eulogy all in one, was such a nostalgic experience for me. I realized that Patty and I are just 4 years apart in age, and we'd shared so many parallel experiences from our youth. When Patty arrived in New York in 1967, we were setting up the student magazine in London to protest the Vietnamese War and amplify the voices of young people. From other sides of the Atlantic, we both lived through an intense period of political and cultural upheaval, and we both ingrained ourselves in the punk movement of New York and London. By the time Virgin had signed the Sex Pistols, you had released Horses, and you'd established yourself as a punk icon. And I clearly remember the record sitting front and center in our Virgin Records stores. Well, now, over 50 years after you bought a one-way ticket to New York, and sadly couldn't have been on Virgin Atlantic since we weren't flying then, our paths have finally crossed, and I couldn't be more excited to be speaking with you today. So thanks very much, Patty, for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for racking horses in the store. I did many books, record signings in Virgin Record stores. So it's
wonderful. Well,
nice to speak.
It's sad to see as time moves on, technology moves on, and most of the Virgin Record stores have disappeared. But that's the way things are. So just first of all, from the audience point of view, who haven't been on this before, a lot of questions are sent in by Literati readers, and so sometimes I'll be glancing down to look at some of the questions. Sometimes we'll be just having a discussion. But I think, first of all, for anybody who hasn't read Just Kids, if that's possible, could you give us a quick synopsis and just touch on your relationship with Robert, maybe describe it a little bit?
Well, I think, I met Robert when I was 20. We were both sort of wallflowers, marginalized kids, both of us struggling financially. Both of us wanted to be artists. I met him by accident, and he became my loved one, my best friend. And we went through many things in life as we evolved as artists and human beings. But no matter what we went through, we remained fast friends until his early death from AIDS. And I just wanted to say one thing, that I never would have wanted to write this book because I thought I would know him forever. But he asked me to write it the day before he died. And he wanted me to write about our young life, because most people only knew him as a 40-year-old, 42-year-old photographer who did a lot of controversial photographs. And of course, he was proud of his work, but he wanted people to get a scope of his young life and our struggles. And so I wrote the book in his memory.
Well, it's so beautiful, and such a beautiful memory, and he'd be honored the way you've written the book, I'm absolutely sure. So when you actually met him, you were living on the street, and yet you were quite close to your mum, and she had a house that she would have been happy for you to have lived in. It was a brave and bold thing to do, and contrary to what I think most other people would have done. Of course, your fascinating, wonderful life ahead would not have happened if you hadn't taken that path. But can you explain what was going on in your head to go off and live on the street?
Well, I left home because I was very close to my family, which the few surviving family members I have, still so close with. I loved my mother and father, but we lived in a very small house. I actually had a little space in the laundry room. I didn't have my own room. And I also had to pull my weight, being the oldest of 4 children. And there was no work. In 1967, in South Jersey, the New York shipyard closed down in Camden, which took home. And finally, I went to New York, not just to, make my way and hopefully become a great artist or meet a new community. I really went to New York to get a job. I had no chance of work where I lived. I had no room of my own. So really, the street was only a step toward another degree of independence.
You also tell the story of taking Robert to your parents to meet them for the first time, and how he had dropped LSD that day. I mean, I've only taken LSD twice in my life, and I definitely could not have met my parents-in-law on either of those two occasions. I mean, how on earth did he manage to hold it together? And did he remember the day the next day?
Oh, of course. Robert didn't really, he wasn't the kind of person to obliterate himself. I've never seen Robert fully obliterated by anything. And he took some, but he had taken enough, I suppose, by then. He knew how to handle himself. But we had a lively household, a small house with 4 kids and a dog and cats. My parents were very open-minded. They had no prejudices. You just had to be a nice person. And they weren't judgmental and very friendly and open. And my parents loved him. My mother, when people would ask her about Robert, she always said, he was a very nice boy. That's how she described him. But he was also shy. So it wasn't unlike him to be a bit quiet. But I could have never done that. Believe me, in my whole life, I never smoked pot. I never did anything around my parents. I couldn't, even as open as they were, I could never do that. But he successfully navigated, and it was and we had a wonderful time. He went home with me many Christmases, even after we had broken as a couple. He still came home with me on Christmas because he loved my family.
And did you ever, I mean, being in a Catholic family, you decided to pretend to be married. Did you ever, did one day you tell them that you weren't actually married, or did that carry on?
No, that was his parents. He came from
a very, I'm sorry, you're right.
Catholic military family.
Yeah.
And he never wanted to tell them. He finally was forced to tell them because I was getting married to someone else. And even though we had been parted as a couple, he being Catholic, he even said to me, he said, "What am I going to tell my parents?" And I said, "Well, tell them we got a divorce." And he said, "Patti, Catholics don't divorce." And I was like, what can I do? But Robert had a little bit of it's so funny, it's partly his upbringing, that military Catholic upbringing did flow through him. And it reared its head occasionally. But my parents, I couldn't lie to my parents. They knew that we weren't married, but they accepted that. I mean, my mother would have been happier if we got married, but they accepted our situation.
The homosexuality obviously plays a part later on in the story, but when you were young, you spoke about homosexuality in that you were quite naive about it, that you didn't have a full understanding of it. You thought it was a choice, not something that somebody was born with. And it's funny that I too, age 16, 15, 16, I went to London, and we had a student magazine, and a lot of gay people would come and ask for help. And in the first month or two, I would think that by help, they wanted to stop being gay. And obviously, within a couple of months, realized they wanted to meet other gay people. And now I think that, the generation of today fully understand that, that people who are gay are born gay, and they have no choice in the matter. But can you remember that naivety?
Well, yes, mine was a bit different than yours. I didn't believe that it was necessarily a choice. I just didn't know this full scope of what it meant to be homosexual, which was the word we used back then. In 1967, we didn't use the term gay, but I had met many people um, who were gay, but they were all the only people that would come out, which were very flamboyant people or cross dressers, but people that were very affected, theatrical, and had the strength to declare themselves. I had never met someone like Robert, who just seemed like a boy in high school with no real, conflict about his nature. That is where I was naive. I didn't understand that to be homosexual didn't mean it was not a stereotype. It was just that no one revealed themselves, or very few people revealed themselves in 1967. And but the times rapidly changed, and I was extremely surprised to find that Robert had such a deep conflict, because we had, a traditional boyfriend girlfriend relationship. We didn't have any problems or conflicts. We did everything young people did, and so it was surprising to me, and that was the lesson I had to learn, was that there's a great arc of people, all kinds of people, and it was a good lesson, but I had to learn it in sort of a painful way through my own boyfriend.
Yeah, that certainly can't have been easy, but in those days there were so many wonderful creative people who were gay, and some of the greatest artists of all time.
Great poets, great. Yeah. I was aware of that. I just, I was certainly, but I think also I'm not the kind of person that really obsesses about people's sexuality. I knew about Verlaine and Rimbaud, but I thought of Rimbaud as a poet. I thought of Verlaine as a poet. I didn't attach their sexuality. I knew Allen Ginsberg as a friend. I knew William Burroughs as a friend, but I didn't think of them in sexual terms. I thought of them as great writers and teachers. And, to me, people's sexual identity is not that important to me. It doesn't really matter. People can choose or, take the path that is right for them. But I think of people more vocationally.
Well, fortunately, I think that's become much more the norm than it was going back to the 60s. So, the Chelsea Hotel, for me, it brought back wonderful memories. We converted an old manor house in Oxfordshire called the Manor Recording Studios, which was sort of the first place that artists could go and spend 2 or 3 weeks making an album and relaxing between sessions. Wonderful sense of community, wonderful sense of artistic freedom, very unique environment, and I think the same seems to have applied to the Chelsea Hotel. I mean, you had wonderful experiences from Bob Dylan tuning your guitar to Salvador Dali calling you a gothic crow. So I just really, what was it like living in the Chelsea Hotel? Don't tell everything, because it was just so great in the book, but just give a quick taste.
I do say, I think in the book that it was really like I was like Alice in a new wonderland. But Robert and I had lived in Brooklyn, very sort of sequestered. We lived a very simple life. We didn't have much money. We had a few friends. So we had a very sort of a quiet life, really based on creating art together, going to our respective jobs, and coming from that to the Chelsea Hotel, which was so lively, active, filled with all of these creative people. not just young people like us, but many people that were so well known. I mean, I'd see Arthur C. Clarke or Dion Arbus, and of course, Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs. I saw Jean-Luc Godard there. I met Muhammad Ali in an elevator there. Everyone came to the Chelsea Hotel, the Jefferson Airplane, the Allman Brothers. I mean, there was always either a band or, Janis Joplin or all kinds of poets and filmmakers. And it was quite, an exciting, interesting atmosphere with all of these people. But it was a different time then. We didn't have the same cult of celebrity. These people, they were all either my age or a couple years older. And, some were, of course, very successful. I was working in a bookstore writing poetry, but we were all of the same ilk, listening to the same music, all against the Vietnam War, all for civil rights, and dressed very similarly. It's just Janis Joplin was Janis Joplin and I was myself, but we lived in the same hotel. Her rooms were just bigger, and we all spoke to each other, and it was really such a creative atmosphere, and nobody was asking people for autographs, taking pictures, selfies. I don't have any pictures of myself with these people. We never thought about doing that. We just lived. We did our work. And I had so many great teachers. I mean, to be able to ask William Burroughs about how to conduct your life, to be able to ask Allen Ginsberg about a specific poem you were writing, it was I was so fortunate and really shepherded by these people. A lot of them took a liking to me, so I was very lucky.
Mm.
Also because I never hid anybody for money because I was always working. But I just think that everyone appreciated fellow workers.
Mm-hmm. You described the Chelsea Hotel as a kind of wonderland. Neverland might be another name for it, perhaps. I noticed in your book.
That was exactly right.
Yeah, I think Peter Pan. I suspect of both of our favorite character from Disneyland is Peter Pan, and my sister lives on a remote island in Scotland where J.M. Barrie actually wrote Peter Pan.
Wow.
And you go through these magical little woodlands. You can almost feel that Tinkerbell's going to come out at any moment.
That's
in fact,
so great.
Next time I'm going to have to arrange for little Tinkerbells to fly around with my grandkids. But I suspect, although Neverland might be one way of describing it. I suspect a lot was going on inside those rooms that Peter Pan might have made a face about. I don't know.
Well, I mean, even for myself, I mean, I was from southern New Jersey. I had been a sickly child a lot of my life, and I really wasn't indulging in drugs or alcohol and things. And there was a lot of that at that time. And unfortunately, I saw how destructive it was to people I really admired. I mean, poor Janis Joplin, I spoke to her only a month or two before she died, talking about new songs and ideas. And, and you think of all of these wonderful people that passed through there, and Jimi Hendrix. And I just, just all kinds of people that destroyed themselves with substances, not meaning to. I mean, not intentionally. It was just, I suppose, part of the culture. But I just didn't. I was lucky because I got to know the best of these people and to learn from them, but I didn't enter any destructive situations. So I survived it.
Yeah, well done. And I think, yeah, your extraordinary memory which comes across in the book. And I doubt it would have been as extraordinary if you'd taken a lot of drugs.
Exactly. A lot of people would have said to me, I don't know how you wrote that. I don't remember the 70s. But I also kept daily diaries, not extensive ones, but just enough that sometimes daily ones where I could look and see, when I first cut my hair like Keith Richards, I know the exact day I met Janis Joplin, the exact day she sang Bobby McGee with Chris Christopherson. So I can chart these little triggers really were also helpful in writing the book. I didn't really do any research for the book except for minor things when I wanted to make certain I got something right about a person I was writing about. I used all of my own source material and many letters from Robert, who did write me a lot of letters.
I couldn't have written my books without my diaries, and I don't care what age people are who are listening to this. I think everybody should have a diary, and it doesn't matter whether you feel your life is not extraordinary or whether it's extraordinary. You should keep a diary. Just scribble little things down, and one day, look forward to doing a book with some of the people listening in today, and but it'll be the richer for you having kept a diary. I mean, I just was going through your book and thinking of the things that we've lived through, and I just wrote some of them down, like Martin Luther King shot dead, Andy Warhol gunned down, Robert Kennedy shot dead, the Vietnamese War, the Sharon Tate murders, Brian Jones drowning, Janis Joplin drug overdose, Jimi Hendrix dead at 27, the Kent State University shootings,
Jim
and
Morris.
then the moon landing. And even although you weren't actually interested in the moon landing, which I was definitely interested, but your glorious words, which you said when it happened, and I'm so glad you wrote these words down. Now men had walked upon it, rubber treads on a pearl of the gods. I mean, just so beautiful. Your words.
Thank you.
I'm envious. Just the good, fantastic words you come out with.
I want to say, I just wanted to say your advice to people about keeping little diaries, I think is wonderful, not just for themselves, but when I was a girl, I never met my grandmothers. They died before I was born, both of them. But my father's mother left behind daily diaries where all she wrote through the 30s and 40s were, what the weather was like, maybe what they had for dinner, what movie they saw, who visited, just little entries. And it seemed so special to me when I was young. It made me want to write. And I think that, to be able to, any little treasured memories, whether it's a recipe or just a little story to leave to your, children or grandchildren to come, they'll treasure it. I found notebooks of my mother's, I never knew she kept them, where she told her private thoughts. And that's, since she's passed away, they're like gold to find these little diaries. So good advice to all.
Oh, likewise. I have an audience question from Woman Heart. The night you saw the Velvet Underground for the first time felt like an important night for you. And can you remember that night? Can you describe that night and the effect it had on you?
I can describe it perfectly, because coming from South Jersey, which was very rural and not a very sophisticated area, and a lot of underground bands, even if they were well known in New York, didn't filter down to where I lived. So when I came to New York in '60, when I came to live in the Chelsea, I didn't know anything about the Velvet Underground, and they hadn't come into my radar. And a couple of my friends were shocked that I had never seen them. And one of them, who was a scholar, my friend Donald Lyons, said, you have to see the Velvets. So he took me to Max's Kansas City in a little room upstairs. And I bet there was about 100 maybe 120 people. And I was standing there with Donald, and they started playing this mix of like, these sonic scapes with surf music, with like streams of poetry. And I just fell in love, not only with this rhythmic music and the poetry, but because you could dance to it. And I love to dance. And Donald and I wound up dancing half the night. I fell in love with the Velvet Underground, and not long after became friends with Lou Reed. And so it was an important night for me, because I learned in one night a really important aspect of the New York cultural voice, which came from the Velvet Underground, which was merging poetry and early surf and R&B music together, which influenced me to do eventually what I did. So it was a very important early influence.
I've always believed that nobody does anything really great alone, and throughout the book, obviously, you document a beautiful pattern where you and Robert take turns lifting each other up and supporting each other. I mean, it's impossible to say, but how different do you think your life would have been if you hadn't met Robert back in 1967 on your first day in New York?
I mean, I'm a survivor. I would have survived. I would have taken a path, but I don't even like to think about that, because really, of all the people I've known in my life, he was the first person to believe in me as an artist, accept me as an artist, and insist that I accepted that about myself, because I had a lot of self-doubt. I had a desire I was writing poetry and drawing, and I had the desire, but I didn't quite have the confidence. Robert instilled that confidence in me because he had it for himself. And his kindness and his love, and how he shepherded me through, the age of 20 to 22, and how much I evolved through our relationship. I would be so heartbroken and sad not to have had that experience. And again, like I said, I would have done what I would do, but to have that, because I've talked to many people, and many people feel I was quite fortunate to have that so young, to have a companion who unconditionally believed in what I was doing, just as I unconditionally believed in him. And that's what really kept us going through all of our difficulties, through breaking up as a couple. We did not want to let that go. And that's how we were able to hold on and really fight for the best of what we had. And we did.
You did indeed. I have another audience question from Jules in Tahoe. Is that a ski place? Tahoe. Anyway, so after being so engaged in visual arts, writing poetry, music, how do your different artistic expressions relate to one another? Is there anything new you're itching to try? And I think you're going to be getting out on the road again soon. But anyway, maybe you could answer that.
Well, I don't think I'm getting out on the road very soon. I mean, we just had all of our summer jobs canceled, doing very small things. But I think that because I take photographs, I write, I perform, and all the things that I do, it seems like it's like a network from my mind. I really write more than I do anything. I really consider myself more of a writer. But how these things interrelate is just that, again, they come from the same source, and that I try with everything I do to to give it the same amount of attention, whether I'm writing a poem or singing for the people. But I'm not very self-analytical, so I don't know if I can give a really, intense answer to that question, except to say that they interrelate because I'm compelled to do them. I don't know why I'm compelled to have 3 or 4 different ways to express myself, but I do. And but I do them all with the same respect.
Have your children taken after you?
Well, I think my children take a lot more after their father. Their father was a great musician. My son is a great guitarist. I mean, truly great, very gifted musician like his father. I never excelled I've never wanted to be a musician. I don't really play anything except feedback and a few chords. I don't think like a musician. I'm more of a performer, where my son is a true musician like his father. My daughter is also a musician, but she is quite a writer and a political activist. She's a climate change activist. So I think she reflects both of us. My son reflects me more in attitude. He's a lot, he is a lot, he's a lot like me, similar sense of humor, um, being able to move through difficult times. And my daughter has the sensitivity of her father. But they lost their father quite young, so it delights me to see them magnify and reflect them. My daughter was only 7 when she lost her father, and yet she's the most like him. So it's the miracle of genetics, I suppose.
In one of your writings, you share the words, we go through life, we shed our skins, we become ourselves. And looking back in your life from your childhood in New Jersey to now, do you think you've become yourself? And what do you think that means?
Well, truthfully, looking at my whole life, I think I became myself about 11 years old. I really think I knew who I was at 11, and I went through different stages of evolution. But these days, I completely am in contact with her. I still feel that same, like we were saying, this Peter Pan wonder of so many things, enthusiasm the same desire to explore, the same kind of enthusiasm. And I think as long as I can maintain that that sense of things, that sense of myself, and yet a sense of wonder, I'll be able to stay at least 11 going on 75. So,
you sound like you're coping with being in your 70s well, and I think both of us seem to be coping well with that, which is, it sounds a foolish thing to say, but I still feel I'm in my 20s. It's only when I look in the mirror that I realize I'm not.
I don't feel in my 20s at all. Nor would I really want to. It's such a difficult time in a way. I'm happy to be going on 75 and 11. I'm happy with those 2 ages. And I'm just happy to be alive. I would say that 90% of my friends and family have passed away, and I have new friends, and I have my children and a sister. But I just feel fortunate that I'm still here, not only to live my own life, but also to remember all of them. So at any age, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, both ways. Reading the book, you can tell that you're full of compassion, full of composure, full of patience, full of understanding, dealing with sort of situations that were sometimes cruel, sometimes heartbreaking. I mean, your relationship with Robert when it broke up, I can't see you, especially having now spoken with you for an hour, expressing any feeling of anger or bitterness. It just doesn't seem to be in your DNA. I don't know whether you agree.
Well, bitterness does not lead to anything creative. It doesn't, it's not good for one's soul. It's not good for your immune system. It's not, it doesn't, it really, it's just not a good thing to nurture. But I don't feel any bitterness. Robert was equally patient with me when we were, breaking up as a couple, because we never broke up as friends. We had to be equally patient with each other. He had to be patient with my tears, or, whatever, we were very, very, both of us wanted to save our relationship. And we both worked very hard to, give each other space to feel pain or feel frustration or anger. And, but it didn't dominate. It didn't dominate our life. Also, we were so young. We were in our early 20s, and life around us was just swirling. I mean, there was so many interesting things happening. Our work was evolving. Our prospects were expanding, and and that was very helpful. But I've never, I think it's very important to learn how to shake off any kind of misery. We're all going to feel it. I mean, I lost my husband in 1994, and some days I feel the pain of that loss as if it was yesterday. So I just ride it out. It's like the roller coaster of life, and then, get on with it. And then go back to being grateful that I knew him, that I had children with him. And I think that's what we have to do in life. It's a package, we're going to enter life and make mistakes. We're going to have some bad things happening, some wonderful things happening. And I think it's important to just embrace the whole package and understand that our ability to survive is dependent on us being able to deal with all the different aspects of what life throws at you.
Wonderful advice. I so love working with the Literati. It forces me to read books, which I still are running a bit and don't always have time to do. And it was just, I just was so pleased to have read Just Kids. Just so special. And I think what I love about Just Kids the most is that it isn't just a book about yourself and your successes. In fact, I think there's only one page in the whole book about your personal success. And I think success can make for a very boring book. And Just Kids is about your struggles. It's about living on the streets, fighting to survive, and your beautiful but complicated relationship with Robert, culminating in discovering that he was gay. I think it's as much about Robert as it is about yourself, and I think it's all the better for that, especially when yourself wrote it. And I think it ends up with one of the most beautiful love notes ever written, and a love note to a dying man. And if I remember the words, it was of all your work, you are still your most beautiful, the most beautiful work of all. Oh. And what lovely words.
Well, thank you so much. I wouldn't have written the book without Robert asking me to write it. And I did struggle. It took me a long time to write it. And, but I'm glad that I did, and that, people respond to it. But I wanted to say one word about what you said about success. For me, even when I was very young, success would mean to do something fine, to do great work, to do something that endured. And that doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily hand in hand with commercial success, which is fun and exciting and profitable. But that's never meant as much to me as just writing a poem I thought was good, or doing a drawing I thought was good, or singing a song once for the people that I thought I did a good job on. It's all, for me, it's really about the work and doing good work. And I think that's the thing that we can never lose sight of as artists, that the most important thing is the work itself. And everything else around it is, they say, fleeting.
We'll leave it with those lovely words again. Thank you. Lovely to talk to you.
It was so nice to meet you. I hope we meet in person soon.
We must definitely do that. It'd be a great pleasure. Cheers, Patti.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.